you shared something before we hit record, and you have some interesting data from the last 6 months. 2.5 million cold calls
Million
that your
calls.
team has made with an M.
Yeah.
25,000 appointments landed. And there's some interesting stuff that you found. So I'll let you take it from there. What is some of the stuff when you're looking through this data? What really stuck out to you?
Sure.
Surprised you in a good or a bad way?
Yeah. I guess I'll start with, this is across, I look just at our client side of the business, not the appointments we're setting for ourselves. So it's probably 35,000 if we're looking at everything. But just for the client side of our business over the past 6 months, 25,000 appointments. These are set with companies of all sizes. We have Fortune 1000 companies we're working for. We have a lot of small to medium sized businesses that we're working for as well. It's all B2B, and it's all primarily focused around services or products, right? Primarily services in a lot of different industries. But we're typically targeting, I think it's safe to say, $1 million and up in revenue for all these prospects, just to get a little idea on the data set. And if anybody wants to reach out to me to get more details, feel free to. Okay, so this is interesting. And some of this is like, duh, but over such a big sample size, it puts a number to it. First thing is, one thing we track is getting to a key decision maker. What percent of the time do we get to a key decision maker? So typically, our percentage is around 8.1% over this series of calls. 8.1%, we're going to get a decision maker to actually pick up and answer the phone. If we know the decision maker is the decision maker, meaning we qualified ahead of time, we confirmed it with a gatekeeper, whatever it may be, we are 3.5 times more likely to get them on the call. So what this tells me is if you're calling and you're asking, hey, can I speak with the person that makes the decisions versus using a name, you're 3.5 times less likely to get them on the phone. So I think that's super important. The other one that stuck out to me is over these 25,000 appointments, 80% were within the range of 4 to 6 minutes, which is kind of like, okay, I would assume so. That makes sense, that the major majority. But if you actually we looked at it in brackets. So 0 to 1 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and 5+. And when you look at it, our close rate, which is our conversion of when we have a pitch. So if we actually get into a conversation, what percentage of the time do we set an appointment with that prospect? 0 to 1 minutes, 0 point something percent. Someone somehow set like a 30-second meeting. Don't know how they do it. I should look into it.
They show?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. They probably didn't know what was going on, though. 1 to 2 minutes, 1.62% close rate. So very low close rate. Kind of makes sense. 2 to 3 minutes, it goes up to 6.11% close rate. 3 to 4 minutes, it goes to 18.13% close rate. And I'm throwing a lot of the numbers out here. I hope you all are following. 4 to 5 minutes, it jumps up to 31.21. And then if we keep them on the phone for greater than 5 minutes, we have a 60% close rate. Which when I looked at these numbers and I've been in this industry forever, I did not expect that. And that just tells me when you're trying to set appointments, the name of the game is to get into a conversation, keep the prospect on the call.
So we met in a way that I don't normally meet people, that I go on their podcasts or have them, come on mine or whatever. And you originally came through the website and it was like, hey, we're doing some cool things. I like your content. Think it might be kind of cool to collab. We had a couple of sales calls, that sort of thing. Is that how you normally get your way onto people's podcasts or what?
Not necessarily. I have to say I'm a huge fan. So I've been following your content for a while, and I think you're one of, if not the go-to people to listen to in sales development, and figured I'd reach out. And, we're starting our podcast here, The Grow Show, that you were on a couple of weeks ago. So go check out that episode if you can. But it just made sense. I was like, you know what? I want to chop it up with Jason, and then, we'll probably end up doing business together in the future in some way, shape, or form. But just some really good conversations so far. So I'm glad I did. Slid into your
DMs. Yeah, you slid into my DMs, man. The thing that I learned in our first call together I thought was really interesting is did a little bit of LinkedIn research, of course, like you're supposed to before a sales call. And I was like, wow, this guy started as an intern and now he's the president of this company. So what's the story behind that? How did you become an intern? How did you hear about Abstrakt? And this was, I think, over 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, over 10 years. So a little bit about Abstrakt. We've been around for 14 years, and what we do is sales development. So essentially everything leading up to you sitting across from a qualified sales meeting is what we focus on. And we started at $0, and our owner, we didn't take any outside funding, and our partners and owners of the company, they ran and operated many successful businesses before this. And what they realized in all the businesses, they were like, what are we best at? Like, what is the thing that we are absolutely best at? Because that's what we should do for our next company. And what they realized was building a predictable sales pipeline. So they said, why don't we start a company around that? So 2009, they founded Abstrakt, and we were one of, I'm not going to say we were the first, but we were one of the first that really started the sales development as a service specifically over the phone. And so it was 2012. I needed an internship. So I was at University of Missouri. I had one semester left, and I had to get my internship to graduate. And I was looking at companies, and I heard that they had a pool table here. So I was like, you know what? That sounds like a cool place. They say millennials don't get attracted by all those fun things. Well, it worked on me for sure. Yeah. So started here as an intern. Didn't really want to get into sales. My degree was in marketing, and I kind of, like most marketing majors, I kind of envisioned, I'm going to sit in a boardroom and think about creative ideas and jingles for things, right? So in my internship, it was an operations internship. So I started on the data side of our company, but I had the opportunity to work with our call center director at the time, who was over, our company was about $3-4 million. We had about 40-ish employees, and we had about 25 to 30 in the call center. And I really fell in love with it. I fell in love with the metrics, the analytics, the way having the right data makes a campaign more successful. So when it was time to go back to college, it being a fast, small, growing company, I picked up all these jobs and tasks that somebody had to do, right? So I was able to work remotely. And then I ended up, after I graduated, I started full-time in January 2013. So then I start with what I was doing in my internship, which was operations and building the data. And then I sort of like push my way into the implementation calls, which is the onboarding of all of our new clients. And specifically what I did is, I ran the portion about the data, their target list. And I loved learning about the clients, their client base, and how do you reverse engineer the perfect target list to go after. So I did that. Got more and more comfortable communicating with clients, and eventually took over implementations and started running those calls in addition to what I was doing with data. So I really love the communication with clients. And that wasn't something I was planning on doing, but just kind of getting into it, something I fell in love with. So then it was about maybe 2 years into my career. I was about 24, 25 at the time. And my CEO came to me and said, hey, we need another partner sales manager. I said, all right, who are we looking at? Because I know you're not asking me to be the partner sales manager. He's like, no, we think you'd be great at it. The position at the time, you managed accounts and people. People making cold calls, setting appointments, B2B. And but I'd never done that. I'd never made a cold call before, but I love the client side of it. So he said, although you're comfortable, you love operations, this is an opportunity for you to really take your skill set to the next level. So went into this role, not really thinking it was the right fit for me, and got kicked in the teeth, right? I struggled, as most people do, when they take on their first management position, let alone sales development reps. But the first thing I had to do was get some credibility. So I had to learn how to cold call. So it's kind of humbling to learn how to cold call in front of a team of people that are already really good at it. So did that, was able to be successful. And then, the job just ended up being a really good fit for me. So about 15 months in, kind of went through the same scenario of we needed a director of the sales center. And before this time, we had gone through 4 directors at this point over the course of our probably 5-6 years. And all of them 15, 20, 25 years of experience in sales and sales development. So I'm not really feeling like I'm the most qualified to take on this position, but I
Yeah.
was the first person to ever play that role that I would be managing. And so that's really a big theme here within Abstrakt in general of, we promote from internally primarily, and being able to really develop and train your team based on actually having lived that role and do that has been invaluable. So then from there, just through growth, we hired our VP of sales at that time. And then through growth, that position turned into a VP role. And now I had to, instead of managing managers, I'm managing managers of managers, which is a whole different ball game. But was able to be surrounded by incredible team members who are all part of my executive team now, who started kind of in those ranks, and was able to in 2019 was able to work my way into president. And then as president, I took over, in addition to the fulfillment of our product and the partner success side, I took on operations, I took on sales enablement. I managed our web development side of the company for a little bit as well, training, quality. And then COVID hit in March of 2020, and it was like, welcome to president. So, but we were able to
Yeah.
get through that, and we're doing well as an organization right now. And it's just something that, if I can do it, I truly feel like anybody can do it. I just worked really hard, and I never said no to an opportunity, and I tried to have a good attitude with what came about. But that's kind of how I ended up in this seat.
Yeah. What did the leadership see in you when you were younger that you did not see in yourself?
So I think that's a great question. I think I was very good at, like, if you have thought, I know a lot of people have anxiety or imposter syndrome or thoughts.
Yeah.
I was really good about having those thoughts in my head, but what I portrayed outside, people would be like, oh, there's no way he
Hmm.
doubts himself, or would, that he communicates so well in front of a group. He's probably never nervous at all. So I think they saw that side of me. And then internally, I was always my harshest critic, which I'm a big believer in. Your biggest strength is your biggest weakness, like always kind of the yin
Yeah.
and the yang. So because I'm my harshest critic, I read books weekly, like as many books and content and podcasts and things that I could do to make sure that I got into a spot where I felt like, I was not only deserving of the role, I could perform at a high level.
Yeah. It's interesting. I asked that question because people talk about blind spots a lot, but they don't talk about the good well, it's not good blind spots. The blind spots that are your good qualities that you've always had them. So you don't really think about that. I see a lot of reps in positions now that want to get into leadership. And I think it's good for them to kind of be aware of how other people see them, their strengths and their good qualities. And you mentioned anxiety. I mean, we had to reschedule this interview because I had a bit of a, 2 or 3 weeks ago or whenever it was, where I was like dealing with a shit ton of anxiety, and you sent me a really great email back, man. I told my wife about it. I was like, dude, Eric seems like an awesome dude. You're like, hey, I've been there, man. And do you have any advice for someone that's a sales rep or a sales leader that might deal with anxiety, and like what's worked for you?
Sure. Well, first off, it's normal. I have it.
Yeah.
You have it. We're both pretty successful individuals. So I think it's important for people to know that you're not alone, right? If
Yeah.
you're going through anything or dealing with anything. Second thing is, I would say it's how you word it in your head first. So I don't like using the words dealing with or suffering from or etc. Because, and I don't want to minimize it either, right? That's not my
Yeah.
intent. But I think it's actually my biggest strength, and I hit on it a little
Mm.
bit. But what anxiety is to me is hyper awareness. The people that probably don't suffer from anxiety, well, not this is a very big blanket statement. I probably shouldn't say that, but I feel like a lot of some of the people who don't suffer from or deal with anxiety, it's because they maybe aren't aware to certain things, and they're just kind of in the moment. Lucky them, super jealous of that. But what my anxiety does for me is I'm always looking around the corner. So in a position like, I think part of the only reason actually I was able to advance as quickly as I was is because I was always looking. I was always looking further than, like, good just wasn't good enough. I was always looking for ways to
Yeah.
improve and get better. So I think it's a superpower, really, if you channel it in the best direction. And a lot of our successful sales reps are wired similarly as me. And I think if you can there's a hump that you have to get over to be
Yeah.
comfortable to a certain extent. But once you get over that hump, those are the rock stars. Like, those are the individuals that I think are some of the best salespeople out there.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought of, X-Men, is it Cyclops, the dude that has the freaking things that come like the lasers
Yeah,
that come out? Is that his name? Cyclops?
yeah, something like that.
Yeah. What I thought about with him is like that's a superpower, but it's like really debilitating for him if he doesn't know how to
Right,
use it, and that's such a great perspective. I've never really thought about because that's sort of the definition of anxiety is like hyper fixating on the future,
right,
you know? And the fact that you are actually thinking about it, because that's I don't know. I always think of the word balance because there's so much sales content that's like do this or that. And I don't know what you found in your career, but what I have found is everything is a balance. You have to think about the past and reflect on that. You should be present, but you should also think about the future a bit. Not too much, but you shouldn't think about the past. It's just like you should do a little bit of everything. And that's kind of what I thought about with that, like the self talk is so interesting. How you talk to yourself. That's probably my biggest takeaway from therapy, honestly, is just the narrative that you tell yourself around what it is that you're, um, you mentioned not using the phrase dealing with or suffering from, like little stuff like that, so that you don't focus on something or try to look at it as something that's debilitating,
right. And
you
looking,
know?
and
You
everybody
accept,
has their good days and their bad days, and it's
yeah,
easier said than done. But I do think there's a lot to it. I do think it's a lot with how you frame it to yourself, because then you project that, right? You project that into
yeah.
the world.
One last question around this, and we'll get into some of the
Sure.
cool data that you have is, do you talk pretty openly to your team about this stuff? Do you show any kind of vulnerability in this area with your team?
Yeah, and I think I could do more, and I
Mm.
probably plan to do more. I think it's not lack of wanting to be transparent. It's more of just, part of my anxiety is I'm always moving forward, right, and focused
Yeah.
on the mission and the task at hand. And I think I could be a bigger voice for this for sure. And because it's whether it's anxiety or something, everybody's going through something, and we're all just
Mm.
humans at the end of the day. And if we can tap in to what makes us the best individual possible in order to serve others, it's going to leave us all in a better place.
Yeah, definitely. So you shared something before we hit record, and you have some interesting data from the last 6 months. 2.5 million cold calls
Million
that your
calls.
team has made with an M.
Million, yeah.
25,000 appointments landed. And there's some interesting stuff that you found. So I'll let you take it from there. What is some of the stuff when you were looking through this data? What really stuck out to you?
Sure.
Um, Surprised you in a good or a bad way?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll start with, this is across, I look just at our client side of the business, not the appointments we're setting for ourselves. So it's probably 35,000 if we're looking at everything. But just for the client side of our business over the past 6 months, 25,000 appointments. These are set with companies of all sizes. We have Fortune 1000 companies we're working for. We have a lot of small to medium sized businesses that we're working for as well. It's all B2B, and it's all primarily focused around services or products, right? Primarily services in a lot of different industries. Um, but we're typically targeting, I think it's safe to say, $1 million and up in revenue for all these prospects, just to get a little idea on the data set. And if anybody wants to reach out to me to get more details, feel free to. Okay, so this is interesting. And some of this is like, duh, but over such a big sample size, it puts a number to it. First thing is, one thing we track is getting to a key decision maker. What percent of the time do we get to a key decision maker? So typically, our percentage is around 8.1% over this series of calls. 8.1%, we're going to get a decision maker to actually pick up and answer the phone. If we know the decision maker is the decision maker, meaning we qualified ahead of time, we confirmed it with a gatekeeper, whatever it may be, we are 3.5 times more likely to get them on the call. So what this tells me is if you're calling and you're asking, hey, can I speak with the person that makes the decisions versus using a name, you're 3.5 times less likely to get them on the phone. So I think that's super important. The other one that stuck out to me is over these 25,000 appointments, 80% were within the range of 4 to 6 minutes, which is kind of like, okay, I would assume so. That makes sense, that the major majority. But if you actually we looked at it in brackets. So 0 to 1 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and 5 plus. And when you look at it, our close rate, which is our conversion of when we have a pitch. So if we actually get into a conversation, what percentage of the time do we set an appointment with that prospect? 0 to 1 minutes, 0 point something percent. Someone somehow set like a 30-second meeting. Don't know how they do it. I should look into it.
They show?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. They probably didn't know what was going on though. 1 to 2 minutes, 1.62% close rate. So very low close rate, kind of makes sense. 2 to 3 minutes, it goes up to 6.11% close rate. 3 to 4 minutes, it goes to 18.13% close rate. And I'm throwing a lot of the numbers out here. I hope you all are following. 4 to 5 minutes, it jumps up to 31.21. And then if we keep them on the phone for greater than 5 minutes, we have a 60% close rate. Which when I looked at these numbers and I've been in this industry forever, I did not expect that. And that just tells me when you're trying to set appointments, the name of the game is to get into a conversation, keep the prospect on the call.
Yeah. Okay. There's so much there. Do you guys use any kind of conversational intelligence tool on the recording side?
Yeah, we use Chorus in our sister company currently, and we're looking at an engagement tool on our side as well. I'm actually in that sales process right now.
Got it. Okay. Because the reason I ask is this aligns really well with, like I'm looking at, let me just pull it up. I'm a bit of a numbers person too.
Yeah.
So yeah, their data says the average successful cold call lasts 7.5 minutes. And I'm like, wow, like the longer the call, sort of thing. The average connected cold call duration is only 80 seconds, and it tells me that a lot of the unsuccessful calls, okay, cool, they don't last as long. But what's really interesting is to kind of peel back that onion a bit. And how do we get someone to stay on the call longer with us, right? And I've talked to you about this. I know you guys have a very refined process, but if the goal here is to get the person on the phone longer, like what are conceptually some of the things that we're trying to accomplish in that call? And then if we could, I'd love to just understand a little bit more about the framework too and how you guys approach it.
Yeah. So I think what I like to use here is imagine you were walking down the street and Jason, I paid you $1,000 if you could keep that person in a conversation for 5 minutes. What would you do? Right? You'd probably be very nice and cordial. You wouldn't be threatening, like coming at them right away. You'd probably ask some thought-provoking questions, or you'd have something of interest that you think that person would care about. It's no different than a cold call, right? Like you're just not going to sit there and see somebody on the street and tell them a million things about yourself and expect them to just stay there. They're going to keep walking. They're going to walk away. So I think that's sort of the concept getting into this call is how quickly can I let this person know that I understand and this isn't like earth shattering by any means, but how quickly can I let them know that I understand their business and the problems that they're facing and establish some credibility around why we would be the best person to solve those problems. And just get them thinking. Right? Just get them into a conversation, actively listening, asking questions, looking for clarification. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, the business acumen is something we talked about a lot, demonstrating in that first 30, 60 seconds that like I understand something about your business, I'm a peer, really differentiating from being a telemarketer, all of that kind of stuff. Do you have any, before we get into the framework, do you have any data around talk, like percentage of talk time is always something I'm curious. But do you have anything around the percentage talk time of prospect versus rep?
We don't. We do for our sales pitches, and it's
Okay.
dramatically correlated to the longer the prospect talks, the more likely they are to buy. I think we all know that at this
Yeah.
point. But, in the cold call, I do not. It's something that we will look into, and I can dig some things up. I do have a hunch though that there's a way to have these calls without them doing the majority of the talking. I do think you should do a lot of the talking, but there is
Yeah.
90 to 10 is not the ratio you're looking for, right? You want to get them
Yeah.
at least opening up on a couple questions.
Yeah. So what's the framework and the kind of approach look like?
Sure. So we want to start the call, and just from an introduction in general, we look at three things. We want to be clear, we want to be compelling, and we want to be confident. So if I tell you to be confident, that's great. Like, oh, great. I'll just go be confident, right? That just comes through repetition and practice. So, we like to say you should know your intro like you know your Pledge of Allegiance. And it's important that there's two really uncomfortable parts of a call: the introduction and the closing. And so I think just in general, like take the uncomfortableness out of it, if that's a word. I think it is. Take that out of it and just memorize those portions of the call. So when you get to
Yep.
that, it's like framework. But we when we get into it, what we like to do, because we work in a lot of service industries, is we just simply state that we specialize in blank industry, and then we offer up a question around what we know is a key problem or topic in that industry. So, for example, in IT, if I'm calling a manufacturer, I'll say something to the effect of, Jason, I'm reaching out to you because we actually specialize in IT for manufacturing companies just like yourself. And what I've been hearing in the market is they're constantly trying to find ways to become more secure as a business. I was curious, what are some of your strategies around security? And then we teach a very easy framework before you get better at active listening. So, what I've found is active listening is tough to teach. It comes with time and experience and getting more comfortable. So, very simply, just a very easy thing is when you get into the questioning part of calls, is we have relevant topics, or so that's a problem or a common theme in the industry. And then we go situation, most consistent issue, and what would take it to the next level. So situation is something to the effect of how are you handling with, how are you dealing with, what strategies do you have in place? So I want to know their situation. And if ideally, like as I get my sales skills up, I can just ask that question. And if they give me a good answer, I can ask another one, actively listening through that. But if you get stuck, which happens for a lot of new reps, the next question is what would you say your most consistent issue is with your security? Now, a lot of people will say, well, why would a prospect answer that? You would be surprised. Like a lot of times, at least in the services portion of what we do, and a lot of products, honestly, they'll say, they'll open up. Well, this is what I'm dealing with, right? And then as soon as you have that, like you have the window for the close, and you can use what they said to close the call. And then, but the last thing is you will have some people like, nope, we don't have any issues. Then you ask them, what would take it to the next level? Or if I was one I like is, well, what's on your what's on your security wish list for this year? What would take your, if I were a genie and I could grant you one wish with your IT, what would it be? Something where you can't object to it. You have to. I mean, you can be rude and hang up the call, but
Yeah.
and that just easy framework kind of helps new reps as they're getting into calls. And then, at any time we teach, if you find an opening, split it open, ask them a question, actively listen, dive deeper into a topic, mirror it, repeat it, ask a follow-up question. And I guess now that I'm here, we have our closing, which is very similar to a lot of people, but based on, we use it based on what you shared with me today. I would recommend that I sit you down with blank, and we like to use the name of the person that they're meeting with. And then we close with 2 dates and times to try to get them to, would prefer that they object to the time rather than the object of the meeting. And then we have
Yeah.
2 follow-up closes as well. And the first one is, as well as I do. So most people are comfortable with status quo. So a lot of people are going to say, my security's fine. Like I don't have anything in place. And so an example would be, understand you mentioned with your security currently, you feel like you have everything quite in a good spot. But you know as well as I do, security is changing every day and technology is getting more advanced by the minute. What I would recommend is you sit down with blank to make sure no matter what, you have your bases covered. And we start this relationship should we ever see a fit in the future. 2 dates, 2 times. And then the last one is the worst case scenario. And some people differ on this, and a lot of our reps aren't comfortable closing 3 times in a call. I think you should close 3 times in a call, even if you don't set the appointment. You get the truth, you get what the
Yeah.
actual objection is, and then great,
Yeah.
let's nurture and follow up with that partnership.
Dude, so much to unpack there.
Yeah, sorry, I just kind of went
So
on.
no, this is great. I love that you have examples too. The intro, clear, compelling, confident. That confidence piece that you hit on is so big, but just repetition, knowing. I always recommend the intro and the close, like just like you, very scripted. Like there's no
Right,
reason that should be very much different, you know? Um, so getting into that, we specialize in category. We're having conversations with people like you that are running across this, and then some sort of provocative question. How are you dealing with this? It's very open ended. And immediately, this kind of gets the prospect. I think what's really tough in a cold call is typically when people answer the phone, they're multitasking, right?
right,
There's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, and another guest, Rod Baptista, mentioned. I can't remember if it's mode 1 or mode 2, but there's one of the modes that people in is like autopilot. It's the mode you're in when you're brushing your teeth, right? Or just processing email, not really thinking about stuff. The mode you want to get them in is, oh shit, someone just ran across the road. I'm alert now, kind of
right,
thing. And this immediately does that at the beginning. You're demonstrating social proof, you're demonstrating credibility, you're telling them just enough about what you do without pitching, which I really like. We specialize in this. That's the other thing I noticed about this is there's no pitch. There's no
right,
outbound squad. We've been doing this for X amount of years, and we were none of that kind of stuff. It's not important. And I think what people don't realize is if you demonstrate enough business acumen and engage the prospect, you actually don't have to talk about your solution at all. You just say, we fix those problems. And I'd
right.
love to, love to talk with you,
100%.
I wanted to ask you about, this is another thing I think is super important, is that the thing I talk about a lot with objection handling is that there's kind of 2 types of objections. There's handling the interruption, which is someone that just says not interested, or I'm about to go into a meeting. But the other type of objection, which is a real objection, is just someone objecting to spending more time with you or this rep you're trying to set me up with. I just don't see value in that because we're taken care of. You handle that objection in advance.
Right.
And do you
With-
want to talk a little bit more about, like, you're basically telling them what they're going to take away from that meeting, which I think a lot of people don't do, which when you're setting appointments for services, you can't say I'm going to do a demo like you can in software.
Right,
I
right.
think is a good thing, actually, because no one wants to come to it. That's not going to be a sticking point for a prospect to see a demo. But can you tell us a little bit more about that piece, the takeaway, the if nothing else, worst case scenario, you're going to get this?
Yeah, I think first off, you have to be confident in the service that you're selling, right? So if you truly believe that this service is going to be valuable to the future customer that you're talking about, you want to do whatever you can to get your business in front of that customer to earn their business. So I think it roots from that. Then we also happen to work with a lot of industries where if you don't have the right IT in place, you're screwed. Like you're just
Yeah.
flat out screwed. So it's almost sort of like, are you like, IT is so important to run your business. Literally, your whole business depends upon it. The worst case scenario is you would meet with so and so for 30 minutes. And if nothing else, you learn something that you need to implement with your current IT. And I just think you almost want to do it, and like it doesn't make sense. Like I don't get why you wouldn't want to meet with so and so. And what
Yeah.
I truly believe in, though, is that can lead to some meetings where someone's maybe a little bit on the fence, right, with the meeting, and they're kind of taking it because, well, the way you framed it makes sense. First off, I fully believe in right person, right company, involved in the decision-making process, get me in front of that person. Or sorry,
Yep.
right person, right company, and they're going to show up to the meeting, get me in front of that person 100% of the time. But
Yep.
I think what we do at the end of the calls is we recap the agenda. And that's where you can say, listen, I know you were a little hesitant about the meeting, but I got to tell you, Joe has been in this industry for 15 years, and everybody that meets with him leaves with something new. And honestly, a lot of them end up partnering with us. So keep an open mind. Like
Yeah.
what, it's just a good way to wrap up that call.
Yeah. It's executives especially love insights. So if you can share an idea or promise to share an idea and please deliver on that promise, you know?
Yeah.
And then one other thing I want to double click on, if we circle back, key decision makers. You said it's kind of obvious. I think it's obvious too, but people don't do it. Where you said you're 3 times more likely to get in touch with that person if you know who they are in advance. And I think it might be kind of obvious if I have someone's cell phone number and I'm calling them,
Sure.
but knowing who the other stakeholders might be, I think is super important. This is something that we teach when someone says I'm not the right person. Oh, that wouldn't happen to be so and so in this department, would it? And even if you're wrong, a person is willing to correct you. But if you are lazy and don't do any research up front at all about who you're supposed to be talking to, people are just very unwilling to help. I mean, I find the same thing with just multi-threading through the sales process. Just knowing who you might want involved and being able to have a name. There's something to that, I think, where you just feel like less of a stranger. When you can talk to people like that.
That's a great point. And we actually, we'll coach on, data is as good as yesterday, right? People are changing companies all the time. And we use the best data sources. Shout out Zoom Info. They're one of the best. We support them for sure. But people are changing all the time, and data can only be so good. We teach, use the name on the record regardless of if you think it's the right person or not, because Sally on the record, who's the controller, is more likely to transfer you to the head of IT than the gatekeeper is. So, I just think, using that makes a ton of sense what you're saying. I completely agree with it. Knowing the different decision makers in the company, having some what we call alternative context to be able to get in touch with is huge.
Yeah. Dude, I love it. We're about out of time. I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
So I feel like the answer for you might be obvious on this first one. And we don't have to choose, but it's always kind of fun. If you had to choose between phone, email, and social for outbound, what are you picking? Why?
Phone. It's how I was born and raised. No, I just think there's no better dollar spent than having a direct conversation with an individual. Obviously I'd pick them all, but if I'm picking one, I'm running a phone campaign. I'm getting really good data. And I'm having a lot of conversations with key decision makers, and I'll put that up just against about anybody.
What is something you believe about sales that most would disagree with?
Okay. I have 2, and I have an interesting perspective because I'm not in the software side of the business, and I know you deal with probably a lot of your listeners are in software sales, and I do a lot of demos. So 2 things I would say is I think at times people can over discover, which is probably controversial and people don't agree with me on. But I think it's better if you have knowledge to fill in the gaps and ask for additions to that knowledge versus I don't want to sit on a call and get banted for 30 minutes as the decision maker. So just fill in the gaps. It's typically when I work with marketing companies like yourself, they typically want to run this decision by their CFO. Is that right? Or is there anybody else that should be involved? Great. We can do that instead of going through 10 questions about that. So that was one, and I'm happy to hit on that at another time. And then the other thing, at the end of sales calls, I think people need to be a little bit more, like, I don't want to twist people's arms to close, but I've been on many demos where the software makes complete sense and there's no reason I shouldn't buy it. And they didn't hold me to it or get me to answer that question, which is interesting. But just say, hey, when I say, I don't know, I need to look at some things, or, I don't think this is a priority right now. Hey, Eric, based on what you shared with me, A, B, and C, this doesn't make sense. Like, why wouldn't you move forward? That question
Yeah.
added to some calls, I think would close some more deals for some reps.
Yeah. Again, one of those very simple things, just simply asking, for the sale
Right.
is big. And lastly, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself as a rookie sales professional?
As a rookie sales professional, I would say start reading now. Start reading now. I think it took me probably 2 or 3 years into my career before I really started investing in my growth and reading books and podcasts. And it's, you can, I've been lucky enough to have our CEO as a mentor, and he's helped me every step of the way. And if I wouldn't have had him, I wouldn't know 90% of what I know. But that 10% I went and got from reading a book a month is what takes you to the next level, because a lot of people aren't willing to do it. So that's what separates you.
Love it. We got to take off. This has been great. Make sure if you're listening, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, leave us a review. And where can people go check out you, Abstrakt? You guys got a podcast as well. Where should people go?
Yeah. So you can, my LinkedIn, Eric Watkins. I'm sure you'll link me when you post this. You can look at our website, abstraktmg.com. It's spelled with a K because we're a little different. abstraktmg.com. And then you can look us up on Spotify as well. We have a podcast called The Grow Show, and it's myself, my counterpart Jeff Winters, who owned and took a company from 0 to 20 million, and then our CEO, who's owned and operated multiple businesses, and bring on incredible guests like Jason. So we'd love for you to check some of those out. We're trying to give the secrets, right? What's helped us grow this business.